As World War II came to a close, the United States successfully executed a campaign of island hopping across the Pacific, wresting control of one territory after another from Japan. When the war ended, the newly formed United Nations placed some of these territories under the protection and administration of the United States, with the goal that the U.S. would help them eventually become self-governing. 4 days after the agreement was signed, the U.S. drew up plans to establish within its new territory a collection of testing sites for nuclear weapons, the Pacific Proving Grounds. Commodore Ben Wyatt, then governor of the Marshall Islands, famously spoke to a group of islanders evacuated prior to testing.
All right, now, James, will you tell them that the United States government now wants to attempt to turn this great destructive force into something good for mankind, and that these experiments here at Bikini are the first step in that direction.
From 1946 to 1962, over 100 nuclear bombs were detonated, both in the atmosphere and underwater. The tests rendered many islands uninhabitable, poisoned plants and animals, killed islanders who had not been evacuated far enough, and left the survivors dealing with the fallout for generations to come. During the 1970s, the Trust Territory split into 4 areas. 1, the Northern Mariana Islands, became a U.S. Commonwealth. The other 3 areas drafted their own constitutions and achieved independence as sovereign states: Palau, the Marshall Islands, and the Federated States of Micronesia. The 3 then negotiated to become associated states of the U.S. under the Compact of Free Association, or COFA.
Free association will take charge of our internal affairs. For external, we rely on USA to represent us. Too many big sharks in the ocean and they may swallow us up.
Under COFA, the U.S. is allowed to maintain military bases within the freely associated states. The U.S. also accepts responsibility for the damage done during nuclear tests and agrees to compensation. COFA states receive U.S. military protection, tens of millions of dollars each year for development, and access to the U.S. Post Office, Weather Service, Aviation Administration, and FEMA. Citizens of the COFA states can live and work in the U.S. without needing a work visa or green card. And if they do, they pay taxes and are eligible for federal assistance programs. Or rather, they were eligible.
It's my great honor and privilege to present the President of the United States of America.
Under the trusteeship, we've come to know and respect you as members of our American family. And now, as happens to all families, members grow up and leave home. As you chart your own course for economic development, and as you take up your new status in the world as a sovereign nation, I want you to know that we wish you all the best. The Compact of Free Association that you've negotiated is an excellent document. You've built a strong foundation for your future. Together, in free association, we can and will build a better life for all. Thank you, and congratulations.
Beginning with the Great Depression and continuing through the 1960s, the U.S. established a set of tax-funded social welfare programs. These included Social Security, aid to families with dependent children, food stamps, Section 8 housing assistance, and 2 types of health insurance: Medicare, for those under 18, over 65, disabled, or pregnant, and Medicaid, for those with low or no income. But attitudes about those programs began to change in the 80s. As the American economy boomed, there was a growing narrative that welfare programs were so generous they incentivized people to stay unemployed.
Some people on welfare make more money than people that are working.
Why should we have to pay for you to sit at home, watch your soap operas, The number of Americans receiving cash benefits had hit a record 14 million, and Republicans wanted radical change.
They create a culture of poverty and a culture of violence which is destructive of this civilization.
When President Clinton was elected, his platform included a promise to reform welfare programs. So in 1996, Congress passed the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act, which ended some welfare programs and increased restrictions on who was eligible for others. Part of that act redefined which kinds of non-U.S. residents could receive Social Security, food stamps, temporary aid for needy families, and Medicaid, and in doing so, it left out COFA migrants. It's unclear if this was done on purpose or if lawmakers just didn't take COFA migrants into consideration. But when the problem was brought up, Congress made no moves to correct it. In the years after COFA was signed, large numbers of COFA migrants moved to the U.S., particularly to Hawaii.
And why leave their island home? The president of the Marshall Islands, Dr. Hilda Heine, explains.
There have been people who live for education, for health purposes.
The latter was particularly important since the incidence of cancer in COFA states is significantly higher, the lingering effects of atomic testing. But COFA migrants, arriving with little to no resources, often relied on federal programs for aid. Without them, COFA migrants would struggle to survive. When it became clear the federal government wouldn't reverse its position anytime soon, activists began to lobby individual states to step in and help. It was an uphill battle. COFA communities were small and often unorganized, and since COFA migrants can't vote, representatives were less likely to pay attention to them. And each state faced its own unique challenges. In Hawaii, low-income COFA migrants could initially get health care through the state-run MedQuest program. But following the 2009 financial crisis, Hawaii rewrote the program to exclude COFA migrants.
That coverage will end in February. Instead, those here will have to sign up for a plan with the Hawaii Health Connector, and that comes at a cost.
If they choose a silver level plan, then they would be getting similar type of coverage they have now.
They were instead transferred to Basic Health Hawaii, which severely limited the number of doctor visits and prescriptions they could get each year. One such patient, Manuel Sound, required regular dialysis and 11 medicines each month. Under Basic Health, his insurance only covered 4 of them. Mr. Sound would go on to be a plaintiff in a lawsuit suing the state of Hawaii for the changes. Initially, it was successful, but the state appealed and the decision was overturned. Many patients undergoing long-term treatments like chemotherapy were forced to reduce or stop treatment. COFA migrants and their allies protested in turn. Then in 2015, Congress passed the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare. Hawaii ended the Basic Health program, leaving 7,600 COFA migrants to try and purchase health plans on the new insurance marketplace. Those already on Basic Health were auto-enrolled, some without being notified, and anyone not on Basic Health had a convoluted process ahead of them. They had to apply for state-funded Medicaid just to be rejected and then bring proof of that rejection with them to apply on healthcare.gov, which is not available in any Pacific Island languages. Following the change, about 23% of Micronesians in Hawaii were uninsured, 5 times the rate of all other Hawaiians. And the islanders' death rates increased by about 21% in the 3 years that followed. Meanwhile, in Arkansas, home to the largest COFA migrant community in the continental U.S., the state never offered COFA migrants healthcare coverage of any kind. Some were able to find jobs which offered health insurance, but these plans often covered just the workers and not their family. Though Obamacare did increase the number of COFA migrants with health coverage, as of 2017, about half of the 12,000 COFA migrants in Arkansas were not insured. COFA migrants in Arkansas who need serious medical care will sometimes temporarily move to other states which do cover COFA migrants, then move back once they are recovered. One such state is Oregon, which implemented the most COFA-friendly health insurance policies in America. After years of COFA migrants lobbying for the state to provide health care coverage, Oregon commissioned a study to look at the costs of doing so. The study found that providing COFA migrants with health care coverage would likely stop certain illnesses from going untreated and becoming chronic conditions. As a result, providing health coverage wouldn't cost Oregon money, Instead, it would be a net saving. Since 2016, the state has covered insurance premiums and out-of-pocket expenses for COFA migrants. But Oregon was the exception. In most other states, COFA migrants who were low income continued to have no health insurance. COFA activists lobbied their representatives, visited senators, and worked tirelessly to raise awareness of the issue. Between 2001 and 2019, more than 20 bills were introduced to reinstate COFA Medicaid eligibility. All of them failed. But everything changed for the COFA migrants, along with the rest of the world, in 2020 when COVID struck.
Reality sets in for many Marshallese as headstones are finally being placed, reminding them of the cruelty of COVID-19 and its impact on their community. KNWA's Lauren Craig-Hall shows us the legacies left behind.
Fresh dirt plots fill Friendship Cemetery in Springdale.
Yeah, this one is very close to me.
It's the final resting place for many Marshallese who've died from the coronavirus.
This is it. You just look at the graves and it tells you like this thing is large. We were at one point losing someone every day.
Minority communities across America suffered greater rates of infection and death, and COFA migrants, because of a greater occurrence of diabetes, are at an even higher risk of complications. But COVID also provided the opening that advocates had been waiting nearly 25 years for. Since she was elected in 2013, Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii had been lobbying to fix the 1996 exclusion of COFA migrants. She had tried to attach a bill doing so to one legislation after another without any success. But following the passage of the first COVID relief bill in 2020, it was assumed a second would follow. Senator Hirono spent months lobbying senators and representatives, building up a coalition of Democrats and Republicans from across America.
We need to uphold our commitment to the Compact Nations and restore Medicaid eligibility for COFA citizens who are legally in our country. We can do that by including my covering our FAS Allies Act to restore Medicaid eligibility for COFA citizens in the next COFA COVID relief bill.
The senator managed to get an amendment into the stimulus bill which would reinstate Medicaid coverage for all COFA migrants. But negotiations on the second stimulus stalled, and in the closing days of the year, no one was sure if it would pass. As the bill underwent rewrite after rewrite, Senator Hirono's amendment ended up cut out of the final draft. But at the last minute, with the help of her allies in both houses, Senator Hirono was able to get the amendment added to the must-pass year-end spending bill, which passed the same day as the second COVID relief bill. After nearly 25 years of waiting, COFA migrants are now once again eligible for Medicaid coverage, effective immediately. There's still more work to do, of course. COFA community organizations are working hard to help everyone who is eligible get enrolled. And COFA migrants are still ineligible for some federal programs. But not every day can be a fight. Some days are for celebration. So today, let us celebrate. It's been a long time coming.